We'll get into the procedure and the risks there in just a moment, but first let me ask you, Minister McMorris, aren't you concerned that you could spend a significant amount of money, perhaps, maybe not, on testing whether or not this potential treatment works when other research is already underway elsewhere in the world, only to possibly learn that it's not viable?
You know, I think if you would look across Canada, and every provincial government puts money into research in many different areas, and some of it is successful, some proves to be beneficial, some doesn't, and that's what provinces tend to choose to do. I think it's very important that, and it was a very good point made, no government would be responsible to move forward and ensure this procedure until the proper clinical trials were conducted. We saw an opening here that Saskatchewan could lead in this area, that we could start clinical trials to help, as I said, either prove or disprove, so that other provinces then can move forward, if it is proven, with this treatment. As other provinces are researching other things that we will benefit from, we are choosing to use this particular clinical trial set, hopefully, to help MS sufferers around the province and across Canada with some hope. Okay, and 11,000 Albertans do have MS in this province. Many are willing to pay for private surgery already. They are not, however, even allowed to do so in Alberta. Why? And should they be? That's next. Plus, we want to hear from you. Should Alberta put funding toward this unproven MS procedure? Tell us what you think. Follow the contact links at albertaprimetime.com. More with our panel after the break.
As far as actually funding the treatment without having enough information behind it, no.
We have to be sure that the research supporting this kind of therapy is highly credible and has been done on enough people and over a long time.
Unfortunately, the evidence is that it's not as effective as perhaps it has been proposed to be.
Canada should come on board and do everything in its power to get these people well. And why not? Seems to be working in Europe.
Alberta should do its part to help people who are facing a horrible disease.
Some thoughts from Albertans on whether or not our province should be spending health dollars on the controversial potential new treatment for MS. So far, our government very reluctant. Gary, you're with the MS Society. Let me ask you, you've got all of these doctors insisting patients who believe they're cured after having the procedure, they're just sadly victims of a placebo effect, they say, that the symptoms will return in time. If that's the case, why don't we hear from these people?
Well, that's a really good point, and it may be that people don't wish to throw cold water on these kind of things, but I think what's important to mention here is that what we need is a balance here, that people need to be heard, and they have a right to be heard. But we need to balance that, and they have a right to seek the treatment they want, but we need to balance that very carefully with rigorous research and the process of research itself, and with the whole area, which is fundamental, the fundamental principle of patient safety. So I think the process, although it may take longer than people are happy with, needs to unfold. But I think what's key is that what people on the street have done is have raised the awareness, and they've spurred all of us into action to work together on this, and I think that's what's happening. They've got the government in Alberta at least forming a fact-finding committee. No money yet for research, but you know, you can't in Alberta, even if you've got the money for private treatment, you cannot get this treatment if you're willing to take on that risk and make that decision with your own body. You're not allowed to in Alberta. You have to go out of country to get the procedure, and Alberta Health Services explains that policy with this. At present, there is no proven indication for venous imaging or venous angioplasty in patients with multiple sclerosis. Therefore, unless part of an approved research protocol, these procedures will not be provided by AHS to persons with MS. If and when there is independent scientific validation of Dr. Zamboni's results, he's of course the doctor in Italy that's pioneering this potential treatment, then Alberta Health Services will seek approval from Alberta
Alberta Health and Wellness to introduce the new procedure into practice in Alberta. And we thank Alberta Health Services for that statement. They're choosing not to speak on this at this point until there's more data available. But let me ask the Minister of Health from Saskatchewan, Don McMorris, you're right next door, and you're now considering going ahead, funding those clinical trials in Saskatchewan, becoming a leader there, and at least research. What about allowing the procedure in your province? It seems like murky territory. Do you allow it? Will you?
You know, not until the proper research has been done. You know, I can't imagine any province or state moving forward on this procedure, any physician, surgeon that would want to move forward on this procedure until it's backed by science. And that's the very aspect of clinical trials. We will not be moving ahead to cover or ensure this procedure until we are made fully confident that this procedure is not harmful, that it has the benefits that people are anecdotally telling us right now as they come back from Europe. But that anecdotal evidence is not the evidence that we need to move forward. We need scientific evidence that can be proven, we feel, through clinical trials.
Brendan Lear, a clinical ethicist from the U of A. I can understand a health minister responsible for public tax dollars saying that the government won't fund it. But if you've got the money yourself and there's some private health care licensed and operating in the province, allowed to be there, it's your body. You're suffering. You heard the woman in Calgary in our earlier segment. She was considering her own euthanasia. Why not allow people to make that decision for themselves? Is that valid?
Well, we're kind of stuck here between a 20th century notion of patient as consumer. So healthcare becomes a consumable product like anything else, and if I want this or that, why can't I purchase it? But the real vanguards of healthcare and the real protectors of patients' best interests are professionals who practice by what we understand as a standard of care, right? And that is, you know, that standard of care has transitioned from what they called in the early days experiential-based medicine. So I heard from Dr. So-and-so that this works, so I might try it, to evidence-based medicine, which means that we have solid scientific foundations for the treatments that we offer. And that the purpose of that is to not only advance medicine in a unified way, but also to protect the interest of patients who are now even more vulnerable to all sorts of anecdotal appeals. So if I type in liberation therapy or Lyme disease, or, you know, if I vaccinate my kid, will he get autism? You know, in Google,
it's a responsible
I'll come up with,
response
exactly,
to quackery.
Yeah,
It's
exactly,
it'll
come up with 1,000
which
pages,
confuses people.
and I don't know whether they're legitimate or not. But I read these wonderful stories, and you know, we're very susceptible, everyone, to what they call an anchoring bias, that you hold on to this piece of information that influences your way of thinking, right? And you look out those positive anecdotes, and we refuse to or don't have access to the negative accounts. And so the whole purpose of evidence-based medicine behind that is to say, here's a clear and coherent way to go forward to test these theories and to see how they work.
Well, we certainly hope for all of the MS sufferers, not just in Alberta, but also Saskatchewan, across the country and around the world, that this treatment proves to be effective someday, or if not this, something else. I think this discussion interesting too, because it obviously can apply to myriad diseases. Thank you all for your time tonight. Saskatchewan Health Minister Don McMorris, Gary Wheeler with the MS Society in Alberta, and Brendan Lear, clinical ethicist at the University of Alberta. Thank you.